Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to your Valentine's Views podcast for Monday, an actual victory Monday for your New York Giants, something that's been few and far between during the 2023-24 NFL season. And here to help me break things down and discuss the state of your Giants, as always, the day after games is Big Blue Views, Tony DelGenio. Morning, Tony. How are you?
I'm doing just fine, Ed. How are you?
I'm good. Folks, before we get into it, please remember to like, share, and subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts across the Big Blue View Radio Network. All right, Tony, how do we do this? The Giants won a game. How do we talk about this? What do we do? I don't know. I'm confused.
If you're a Giants fan, you should be happy.
Yes. And
And
actually,
the other thing I'll say, okay, is that it's not a matter of what you say; it's a matter of what you were feeling while you were watching the game, and because you can't control the feelings that are welling up inside you, and either you're happy to see them doing well, or you're not happy to see them doing well.
And I'm glad you started there, because that is where I wanted to start. You know, the column that I wrote last night after the game. There are people who are upset that the Giants won this game. They wanted the Giants to finish 2-15. They wanted to guarantee the first or second overall pick. And I'm sorry. And if you're one of those fans and you're listening to the show, I'm sorry, but I don't understand that attitude. I don't understand how you call yourself a fan. I don't understand how, if you're watching your team play, you can be rooting for that team to lose. I get the fact that the more games we lose, the higher draft pick we get. But that draft pick guarantees you nothing. So I don't understand that I want my team to lose attitude. I just don't.
Yeah, and I'll throw one more thing that kind of gets a little bit to that your last point. You can't be so sure that Caleb Williams and Drake May are the two best quarterbacks in the draft. That's certainly how they're ranked right now. There's no question about that. But we don't know who the best quarterback from this draft is going to be once they get into the NFL. And so if you think you have no shot to get a better quarterback, if that's what you think the Giants need, if you think you have no shot to get a better quarterback if you don't have the number one or the number two pick, you're really fooling yourself a little bit, because in many years, the best quarterback to come out of a draft has not been the guy that was drafted number one, and certainly not number two. Those two may turn out to be the only two great quarterbacks from the draft, but neither of them might turn out to be great, or one of them might turn out to be great. And so, yeah, being upset in advance, I think, is reading too much into things we don't know about.
Well, absolutely. And I've watched. Let's talk about those two quarterbacks quickly. Caleb Williams has been the number one guy forever and ever, but there's a lot of questions now about Caleb Williams, and maybe that's just people trying to poke holes in Caleb Williams. Maybe it's overreaction to him being emotional and to him, refusing to talk to the media the other night. But there's no guarantee that Caleb Williams is going to be a great NFL quarterback. I watched Drake May the other day, who some people think is going to be, the first or second overall pick. I watched Drake May, and he went 16 out of 36 against Clemson, against a team that has a whole bunch of NFL caliber players on its defense. And I need to study Drake May a lot more. I need to look at what he's all about. But that leaves me with a question about what Drake May can be at the next level. And maybe that's I'm not going to overreact to one game, but there's no guarantee. Shoot, you think the Houston Texans are happy that CJ Stroud wasn't the first overall pick this past offseason?
Right. And going back to Caleb Williams, okay, he's playing against a good UCLA defense, and all season he hasn't looked good against the better defenses that he's come up against. And so it shows you that there are limits to what any of these players can do at this level. And people compared Caleb Williams a lot to Patrick Mahomes because of his kind of creativity and ability to do things off schedule and throw from different arm angles and things like that. People have to remember that Patrick Mahomes was not the first quarterback drafted in 2017. Patrick Mahomes was drafted number 10. All right. And I think he turned out okay. Last time I checked, that people didn't in Kansas City didn't seem to be too disappointed that they had Patrick Mahomes. So meanwhile, Mitch Trubisky was taken number 2, and obviously he has not succeeded except for 1 year really in the NFL. And so you just don't know what these guys are going to look like when they get to the pros. It has a lot to do, I think, with the coaching they get when they get there. And that's another thing, right? And if you have confidence in the coaches might be able to maximize what they have. And at this point, I think it's just too early to draw conclusions about how you're doomed or not doomed, depending on where you fall in this year's draft. Jaden Daniel looked crazy on Saturday night. On the other hand, it was against Georgia State. So how much, do you count 6 TDs against a team like Georgia State, which is not in the same league as LSU and the league they play in is. So I think, at this point, do you really want the Giants as an entire team to be so inept that by the end of the season you say, my God, there's 10 different positions we need to upgrade at? Or do you want to actually see them show some promise at some positions and think that maybe there are fewer things they need to upgrade?
Absolutely. And before we get off this particular topic, I want to throw a couple more examples out there. Lamar Jackson, who's won an MVP, was the 32nd overall pick. And what was he? Maybe the 4th quarterback taken in that draft class. I don't remember exactly. 5th quarterback taken in that draft class.
In that draft class, I remind you, the first 2 quarterbacks taken were Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold. You had to go 1-2 in order to get those 2 quarterbacks, I believe.
And then, people last night on Twitter, or the platform formerly known as Twitter, were throwing the Trevor Lawrence 1 and Zach Wilson 2 thing at me. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a mistake by the New York Jets. That's a mistake by the New York Jets for overrating the player and not doing something else. That's not, to me, that has nothing to do with winning and losing and all of that. That is simply bad scouting by the New York Jets to think that player deserved to be the 2nd overall pick in the draft. Just because you think you need a quarterback, you don't take a quarterback unless you're in love with that guy. And I think that's on the New York Jets. That has really nothing to do with draft position. That's bad scouting.
And of course, we can add one more thing. After yesterday, you got to say, well, the Giants have already found their quarterback.
I don't know about that, but listen, it is Tommy DeVito's world right now. We are all living in it, and I don't want to be Debbie Downer. I don't want to be that guy, but last year when Mike White got to play a game or 2 for the New York Jets, everybody thought Mike White was the be all and end all, as the quarterback, and thought he should be the number 1 guy. And where is Mike White now? I'm not even sure I know where Mike White is, but
yeah, I forget what team he landed on.
I feel really good for Tommy DeVito. I'm happy for the kid. The kid played well on Sunday. He's shown toughness. He's shown some accuracy. I still don't think he's got a big arm on the deep ball, but he's shown the ability when he can set his feet and when he sees the play. He's shown the ability to put the ball on target. He showed toughness in taking all of the hits that he took yesterday. But let's pump the brakes on Tommy DeVito being the quarterback of the future. I think what Tommy DeVito is showing is that Tommy DeVito belongs in the league somewhere as a backup, He belongs in the league. He can do some things. But my goodness, 9 sacks yesterday, and I would venture that half of them were on him. 4 or 5 of those were on him. As poorly as the offensive line has played this year, that really should have been a 4 or 5 sack game. Oh, and a listener points out that Mike White is in Miami, just so that we clarify that, where he gets to watch Tua every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and really, just to be serious about the quarterback situation, what Tommy DeVito is really doing is auditioning to be the Giants QB3 next season,
Or
and
QB2 possibly.
possibly QB2, but I don't really think so. But possibly he should have a chance. He should have a chance.
But yeah, if they have to keep Daniel Jones because of contract, and we don't know. I mean, there's speculation about how the organization feels about Jones at this point, but Jones is going to be there. A draft pick of some level is almost certainly going to be there, whether it's first round, second round, whatever. So yes, Tommy DeVito is auditioning in some respects to make sure he stays on the roster next year.
Yeah, and I think if there's one lesson that we've learned this year from what's happened to the Giants, is that you really need depth on your roster to truly compete in the NFL. And there's no place you need it more than quarterback. I mean, the Giants aren't the only ones in a mess of a situation at quarterback. And what you're seeing around the league is that despite the fact that the league has all of these rules in there to prevent you from hurting the quarterback. And I mean, and sometimes they're ridiculous. Now you lay a pinky on the quarterback and they call you for roughing. I mean, it's really gotten absurd as to the things that they call roughing on, I think,
absolutely,
in the league. But despite all of that overreaction to quarterbacks getting hurt and their attempt to fix it, quarterbacks are still getting hurt a lot in the NFL. And there are a lot of teams that have a mess and have to trade for a quarterback in midseason because their quarterback goes down. And so you really do need depth at that position if you hope to compete at all.
Absolutely. And the Giants, theoretically, with Tyrod Taylor, have one of the NFL's better backups. The biggest issue with Tyrod Taylor is he seems to get hurt whenever he gets any sort of extended action, which is the situation that the Giants are in right now. And
which you could also say about Daniel Jones.
Right. But you're absolutely right. And the thing about quarterbacks in this day and age is all of those protections apply in the pocket. But Eli Manning always used to say that the best and safest place for a quarterback was in the pocket because of all of those protections, because he could see everything coming. And the place where the quarterback is not protected is when he starts to run or when they use him as a runner. And that's where these guys are getting hurt a lot of times now, is once they get out of the pocket, when they're running, when they don't have those protections. My goodness, the shots that Sam Howell took yesterday on that touchdown run. I don't know if you saw the Minnesota game last night, but for some crazy reason, on a 3rd and inches or 4th and inches, the Vikings decided to put TJ Hawkinson under center and pitch the ball to Josh Dobbs, who not only fumbled, but he took a shot that almost broke him in half. Why would you expose your quarterback to that on purpose? I don't get it.
Yeah, a degree in aerospace engineering will only get you so far in that situation.
yeah, that's not going to help you in that situation. Nope. Maybe that degree in engineering should have led Josh Dobbs to say, guys, let's take that one out of the playbook before we run it.
I mean, aerospace engineering is all about failure modes and things like that when you're designing something. So he should know.
You would know better than I would, Tony. You would know better than I would on that one. Let me ask you a question here. Short-term question. Before Sunday's game, I would have said to keep the locker room, to give them the best opportunity. It was a no-brainer that when he was healthy enough to play and come off IR, that Tyrod Taylor had to be the quarterback. I'm not so sure that's the case. After the way DeVito played on Sunday, what does Brian Daboll do? I mean, do we wait and see, what we see from DeVito this coming Sunday? But I mean, what does he do for the last 3 or 4 games if he's got both guys?
I've thought about this a little bit, and I think I come down on the side of them still starting Tyrod Taylor once he comes back from his injury, because ultimately he's the more experienced quarterback. He showed that he can move the team. And again, by the way, what was Tyrod's best game? It was the other victory against Washington, right? In which he played really well. And, other than his one brain cramp at the end of the first half in Buffalo, he played a pretty good game in Buffalo as well, I thought. And so I think it sends the right message to the team that you let him come back and take over the starting position once he's healthy. I'm not 100% convinced that that's the right move, but that's probably how I'd lean right now.
Yeah, I think if I had to make that decision today, I think I agree with you as well. I think that DeVito did some really, really good things on Sunday. He did some good things the week before, but we also saw, in a lot of cases, we saw with the sacks and with the pressures and with some of the things that happened, we also saw the inexperience. And yeah, I think, now if DeVito goes out and lights it up this coming Sunday against New England, maybe we have to revisit this conversation. But right now, I think Taylor has to play when he comes back. So, but interesting decision, and one that Brian Daboll is going to have to make in a couple of weeks.
And actually, it's good that the Giants are facing the opponent. To me, it's good that the Giants are facing the opponent that they are next Sunday, because although New England is having a terrible season, also, I think more of their problems are on the offensive side, and specifically at the quarterback position, and maybe at the coaching on the offensive side, than they are on the defensive side. And if there's one thing that we know about New England, we know that Bill Belichick specializes in designing defenses that can give quarterbacks problems. And so you can bet that he will be coming up with things to try to fool DeVito into throwing the ball where it looks like there's an opening, but there really isn't an opening. So if DeVito can be successful against a Bill Belichick defense, and by the way, Patriots, I believe, still have a pretty decent pass rush with Josh Uche and a couple of other people. I'm trying to remember who else they have on their pass rush in their pass rush group. But if he can perform well against that defense, I'll be actually very impressed, because I think that's a tough coach to go up against if you're a quarterback with very little experience.
Tony, you're absolutely right about Bill Belichick. And there was a time when I might have been more worried about a Bill Belichick team coming off of a bye week, facing a young quarterback like DeVito. But the Patriots are bad. But so we'll see what happens. I mean, Belichick is still Belichick, and he's still capable of that. But Tony, I want to move to a couple of other topics. And when I did the kudos and wet willies for Monday morning, a couple of folks noted that I've been hard on the Giants coaching staff recently, and I didn't offer kudos to Brian Daboll or Mike Kafka or Wink Martindale for Sunday's performance. And that's true. I didn't. In all honesty, I generally like to keep the coaches out of the kudos and wet willies. I've kind of felt like it hasn't been possible sometimes this year. But when I think about Sunday, when I think about what we saw from the Giants offense, what we saw from the passing attack, it reminded me more of what we saw a year ago. We saw a 3rd and inches play action pass down the field. We saw a really well schemed big play to Daniel Bellinger coming out of the backfield. The both touchdown passes to Saquon Barkley were beautifully schemed and good calls. We saw the Giants miserable running the ball in the first half, make some adjustments in the second half, and get to the edges more. This game reminded me so much more of what we saw last year in terms of schematic advantages and play calling than what we've seen much of this year. And it made me shake my head at it. Where has this been all year? Because I thought it was a brilliantly schemed game by Mike Kafka and Brian Daboll.
Yeah, I think you're really on the mark about that. In my own article last night, after I wrote it and submitted it, I thought maybe I needed to say something also about Saquon Barkley, because the thing that struck me about the game, I mean, first, it was such a weird game for him because he had 0 yards rushing in the first half on, I think, 8 carries or something like that. So you'd say, oh, he was having a terrible game, but of course there were no holes for him to run through. It wasn't his fault at all. The Commanders were showing him a lot of heavy boxes, and that's something that the Giants are facing every week. They get those heavy boxes from opposing defenses because they don't fear the Giants' passing game. And so what did they do? They used him as a pass receiver, and that sent me back to the Pat Shurmur era when he would send Barkley out on pass routes. And I remember Barkley catching, I think, a long touchdown pass in Washington, if I remember, as a rookie. I could be wrong about that, but in one of the games against Washington, as a rookie, I think he caught a long touchdown pass. And they've used, ever since, really, even starting with the Joe Judge era, they've used Barkley relatively little downfield as a receiver. And I mean, he doesn't have the greatest hands in the world as a pass receiver. I can think of a number of passes that he's dropped over the years as well. But it's another threat for a team that is looking for threats in the passing game. And I really liked that they were using him in that way yesterday. And I thought he did a great job in that way yesterday. And so maybe I should have given him a shout out in my article, and I was remiss in not doing it.
Just bad work by you, Tony.
Yep.
Just bad work. Bad work. I don't know.
It's the deadline pressure.
There you go. There you go. Blame the boss. There you go. No, listen, I've also been critical of Barkley. I've said a number of times that he had 94 catches as a rookie. And yes, Pat Shurmur used him as a weapon more, but a lot of those catches were also, 3rd and 15 dump offs where it was like, we got nothing. We're 3rd and a mile. We're just going to dump the ball to Saquon and pray that he can make something happen. And I remember a lot of the time Giants quarterbacks getting criticized for dumping the ball to Saquon so much. I have always said that Saquon is a matchup nightmare for a lot of these guys. He's a matchup nightmare for linebackers. He maybe isn't the route runner, maybe isn't the receiver that we thought he was. But as you said, I thought it was a really good thing for the Giants to do on Sunday to create some situations for him in the passing game. He made a brilliant catch on the first ball that DeVito threw to him. Best catch I've seen him make in a long, long time. So really good game. Really, I just thought really good work by the Giants to do some things that we hadn't seen so far this season. And like I said, it just as good as it was to see, it made me shake my head and think,
where was this in some other situations for the Giants this year? Because it's the kind of stuff we saw all the time last year. Being willing to take a deep shot on 3rd and inches, which obviously meant they would have gone for it on 4th down. Just even the way on the shorter Barkley touchdown, even the way that all the crossing routes created traffic that helped get him open. The deep shot for a touchdown to Darius Slayton on that 3rd and inches. I watched the route on that play, and it was a beautifully designed 2-man route. Which was a crossing route by both guys that created traffic that helped Slayton get wide open. So I just don't think we've seen enough of that from the Giants. Maybe it's been there, and the offensive line hasn't allowed it to develop. But I thought it was a good development.
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to figure out what happened to them early in the season, and just to speak to, I think what you're wondering about. I mean, I can't explain. I don't know, but it seems to me as if they maybe it's just a guess that maybe they came into the season and they say, okay, we're gonna, this year we're gonna change. Last year we were run game centric, and now we've added things. The offensive line has more experience. We added a new center, and we've added receivers. We've added Darren Waller, blah, 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 blah. Daniel Jones has a year in the system, right? And so now we're going to try to morph into this pass-heavy offense that Dable ran in Buffalo and that Kafka has always been a part of in Kansas City. And then the first game came along, and the Cowboys' defensive front just destroyed the offensive line. And it's like they played, I don't know, it seems to me like they played scared after that. They even played scared against Arizona until the second half when they got down by 3 touchdowns and finally said, geez, we got to do something. and they played scared, I think, against San Francisco also. And it's like they just didn't have the confidence to implement the game that they thought they could. I don't know. I mean, it's hard for us to know what was going through their heads. But you're right. So much of the stuff that we loved about last season, watching them, how much fun they were to watch last season, not just because they were succeeding, but because they were succeeding in interesting, creative ways. All of that seemed to be gone this season. I don't know if we'll ever know the answer to that. But you're right. Yesterday we started to see some of that again.
Absolutely, and I think you're right, and I think we've written about that at Big Blue View. I think I have, at least. I think that the Giants wanted to advance this offense. They wanted more. They wanted more explosive plays. They wanted to be more quarterback centric than running back centric. And I think that impacted how the games were called. But I do think we're starting to see more of what the Giants were a year ago, at least the last couple of weeks anyway, and Sunday in particular. That's more of what we saw last year from the Giants. So I thought that was a good development. So let's talk about the defensive side of the ball. And I'm just going to say this. Can we please stop with the Kavon Thibodeau was a mistake to be drafted at number 5? Can we just please stop with Thibodeau as a bust? And, this young man is 22 years old. First player in the history of Wink Martindale as a defensive coordinator to have double-digit sacks, because Wink just doesn't build his defenses around one player. And the guy, yesterday he made impact plays in the run, in the pass. He's a really, really good player. And the criticisms of him just need to stop.
I agree with that completely. There are games when as a fan, you'll be disappointed that he doesn't seem to be getting to the quarterback. But I think we already know, and Wink has said this, and you can see it in the stats, that he drops Thibodeau into coverage more often than other edge defenders are. I think Travon Walker in Jacksonville is the only other kind of leading edge player that's used in coverage and not in pass rush as much as Kavon is. And the other thing is that he's really the Giants' only outside pass rush threat. I mean, thank goodness they have Dexter Lawrence in the middle, because he's an absolute beast. But Kavon is really the only outside threat. They're getting nothing on the other side of the line. So if you're an opposing defense, how would you plan to attack the Giants offense? And I think the answer is, partly you keep a guy on the other side, a tight end on the other side, to help out with Thibodeau, to chip him or something like that, right? Or you go away from his side, or there's any number of things you can do to try to avoid his impact. And some games it's successful and he's not able to get to the quarterback, or some games Wink is just using him differently. But he's had enough games this year where he's been a dominant force, a really disruptive force to opposing offenses, that I think you have to be really happy with his development and what they've gotten out of him.
Absolutely. And the thing of it is, every good player, if you want to call Thibodeau a great player, I think it might be early to do that in his career, but every top tier player has dominant games, dominant moments, and then has quiet games. You look at, I don't have Micah Parsons' stats in front of me, but I would venture a guess that Micah Parsons has had a couple of quiet games this year. Those things happen. And I get criticized because at times I've written, Kavon Thibodeau had a quiet game. Kavon Thibodeau didn't do much today. That doesn't mean I'm saying Kavon Thibodeau is a bust. It means that you have high expectations for Kavon. And in this game, he didn't deliver. He didn't, but every great player has quiet games. Every dominant defensive player has games where they don't dominate in. It's the overall body of work. And I don't think anybody can or should complain about the overall body of work, from a 22-year-old kid who's showing that he can be a top tier, tremendous defensive player.
Yeah. And I think it's noticed more by Giants fans when he doesn't have a dominant game, because other than Dexter Lawrence,
there's nobody else.
And so if he's not getting to the quarterback from the outside, nobody is. And then the only thing is to have Dexter come up the middle and wreck things that way, which he does so often. I mean, it's amazing. But that's the thing. He's really isolated there, and so he's very easy to notice. You compare that. He's compared a lot, obviously, to Aiden Hutchinson, who was drafted just a couple of picks before him. But Aiden Hutchinson, first of all, is used almost exclusively to pass rush and sometimes to play the run, but almost never in coverage. And the Lions have like 3 or 4 different guys on the outside who are really good at rushing the passer. And so he doesn't have to be the guy to get to the quarterback. And that's, that's a different situation than Thibodeau is on with the Giants.
Absolutely. And I realized this morning when I looked at the snap counts and the stat sheet that Azeez Ojulari deserved a wet willy for what he did yesterday. Azeez Ojulari was on the field for 49 snaps and did not make the stat sheet. Mm-hmm. Not even with an assisted tackle, not with a pressure, not with a quarterback hit, nothing. And I know he's been hurt. I know he's been in and out of the lineup. He was questionable for part of the week with an ankle, or was on the injury report for a couple of days with an ankle injury. But he's out there for 49 snaps and he did nothing. And it's disappointing.
Yeah. Well, and the problem with that for me is that I in the middle of the game or 3/4 of the game or through the game or whatever, I was actually thinking to myself, how many snaps has Aziz gotten in this game? Because I'm not noticing him, and sometimes I'm not very disciplined in the way I watch a football game. I watch football game as a fan, and I'm not paying enough attention to some of the details. But I was thinking to myself, man, I haven't heard his name called today. I haven't seen him getting near the quarterback. I said maybe they're just limiting his snaps. And then, as you say, this morning the snap counts came out in 49 snaps. So I was like, okay, he was out there. He just wasn't doing anything. And yeah, that's a real disappointment. And you say maybe it's his health, but gee, before the season's over, I mean, he's got to step up. And I think it's pretty obvious they have to draft or sign as a free agent an edge rusher to complement Thibodeau on the other side, and that we should just assume that Ojulari is going to be sort of like the number 3 rotational guy next season, and that I could imagine maybe is a viable plan for the future. But it looks like having him as the starting number 2, if for no other reason than the fact that he gets injured so often, I think they just can't go into the next season with him as the number 2 edge rusher.
No, they absolutely have to, they absolutely have to upgrade that spot. Um, I just wanted to say, I mean, I know Cordell Flott got ejected yesterday, and you can't be throwing punches. You can't do that. But the reality for me with Cordell Flott is that I'm gaining more and more appreciation for that young man's play. He plays hard. He's done a really good job. He's gained some weight since last season, and he had a really aggressive punch out on a fumble, to cause the Logan Thomas fumble. For me, as we talk about good things about winning games, good things about development, I've pointed out, I think the only team in the league that's played a younger roster than the Giants so far this season is the Green Bay Packers. But you're looking at development of players like Flott, Micah McFadden, Tay Banks, who's had ups and downs and gave up 1, if not 2 touchdown passes yesterday. John Michael Schmitz getting a lot of snaps. Wan'Dale Robinson playing more and more and made some nice plays yesterday. But for me, it's the development of some of these young players that's so important. A lot of these guys are going to be part of the Giants' future. And when people talk about, oh, no, we don't care if they win. Well, I care about whether these players develop properly. I care about whether they learn how to win. I care about whether they get better, whether they learn to be professional, because that all ties into the Giants being a better team long-term, which is really, for me, what this is about.
Yeah, and I remember all the joking at last year's draft, the 2022 draft, that after the first round, Joe Shane drafted a bunch of guys that Chris Flum hadn't even bothered to profile in all of the.
Chris is still mad about that, by the way.
Yeah, in all of the profiling that he does, he hadn't profiled, I think, Wan'Dale Robinson. He hadn't profiled Flott. He hadn't profiled Belton. He hadn't profiled McFadden. And now you look at those guys. I mean, Belton, seeing the field, I don't know that he's done that much yet, but Wan'Dale is making plays out there. As you say, Flott's making plays out there. Micah McFadden is playing really well. I mean, one of the more amazing things to me about this season, as bad as many of the other aspects have been, is that you look at the Giants now between Okereke and McFadden, and even Isaiah Simmons, who had a pick 6 yesterday to seal the game. It's like, wow, they've got some pretty good linebacker play on the Giants. And I might not be going into next year's draft thinking that, oh, the Giants have to draft a linebacker. When was the last time you might have said that about the Giants? They didn't have to draft a linebacker. So Joe Shane has done some pretty nice things in the draft with players that a lot of us had never heard of before.
Absolutely. And, it is, I always remind people, or try to remind people, that the Giants, since they won that Super Bowl in 2011, beginning of 2012, they've been to the playoffs twice. They've won 1 playoff game. They have been, they've played a lot of terrible football.
You know, for a 5-year stretch there, they were tied with the Jets for the worst record in football. Fixing all of that, building the kind of roster, as you said, they've got some top end pieces, but fixing all of that depth, you know, getting, you know, they were fortunate yesterday. Darnay Holmes has been found wanting as a full-time starting slot corner. But when Cordell Flott got ejected yesterday, they had Darnay Holmes to come in the game. And Darnay Holmes had an interception. The Giants don't have that kind of depth in a lot of places across the roster. And that's where you want to get to be where the Cowboys are, to get to be where the Eagles are. Was it in Dallas? You know, what has Deron Bland done since Trayvon Diggs went out? He's basically morphed into Diggs. And that's where you want to get to. And it takes time. It takes time to build that. You only have so much money to spend every year. You only have so many draft picks. And it takes time. And I think the development of a lot of these young guys has to be promising.
And you mentioned Deron Bland. The thing about him and the guy he replaced, Trayvon Diggs, and about the Cowboys defense in general is that they attack the ball. They're not just trying to defend passes. They're competing with the receivers for passes, and that's something that I've always been disappointed with the Giants about for years. Is that they don't get the turnovers, they don't get the interceptions. But like slowly over the last couple of weeks, I think they're going at the ball more aggressively. It seems to me anyway, than they have most of the season. And I said yesterday, three interceptions. So I hope that that's something I'm not just imagining, that maybe that they're developing as pass defenders and getting a little bit more confident in what they're doing out there, some of the young guys, so that they feel that they can go after the ball too. Because I mean, I don't know, one of the things I said in my piece last night is, how do you win a game where your quarterback gets sacked 9 times? Well, 6 turnovers is maybe how you explain why the Giants won that game yesterday, because there's nothing like taking the ball away from the other team to prevent them from scoring and beating you. And so yesterday was really the first game in a long time that I feel like the Giants won because of their ability to force turnovers. I don't remember the last time they did that.
Nor do I, but it should have been 7, Tony, because Jason Pinnock really needs to hit the jugs machine.
Really?
He really needs to hit the jugs machine, because he should have had that one.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, a lot of times forced fumbles don't happen by accident. And maybe, Bobby Okereke ripped 2 balls out yesterday. Flott ripped out 1, and maybe that is trickling down with the defense and all of that from the way that Okereke plays. So I think that's a good thing. I do think a lot of positive things for the Giants, and we don't know what's going to happen in the draft. We'll figure out where the Giants are going to be. If Joe Shane really wants Drake May, for example, he'll go get him. He'll move draft picks and he'll go get the guy. Maybe Jaden Daniels is the best quarterback in this class. We'll have to see. But for now, I'm enjoying the fact that the Giants won a game. Yes, it's against Washington, but a win is a win. And I'm happy for these guys who put their bodies on the line. I'm happy for all of these guys. There's careers on the line every single week, jobs on the line every single week. And it means something to those guys to win games. I think it's good for everybody's development. So I'm happy that they won. I wish everyone who called themselves a Giants fan was happy that they won.
Yeah, and I think you're affected a lot by, I don't mean you specifically, we're all affected a lot by the fact that they've had 3 or 4 not just losses but blowout losses that made them look like they're an absolutely awful team. But the fact is that if they call a play on 4th and 1 late in the Jets game and make the yard. And if Tyrod Taylor calls the pass play that was given to him rather than opting for the run at the end of the first half, the Giants might be sitting here this morning 5-6 and a half game behind Minnesota for the last wild card berth. And so, they're not. They seem a lot worse than last year, but they're not actually a lot worse than last year. And I noticed that Brian Dable, when he spoke to the team afterwards, after the game yesterday, he said to them, "You're a good football team." And I hope he's not just blowing smoke saying that to them and trying to pump them up falsely, but you say that, they were a good team last year, and things aren't that much different this year. It's, but they've had a harder schedule. They've had a few real stinkers. Obviously, they have weaknesses that have been exposed this year, but they're not as bad as they seemed to us. I think a couple of weeks ago, when it looked like they were getting blown out, kind of almost regularly. There are obviously things wrong, but there's a core that's being built. I think that with a few more pieces and with a little bit better injury luck, if they could ever have that for a change, that they're not far from really being able to compete.
No, and they do have to fix that offensive line. They do have to address the line. I am one who believes, and it comes back to the draft, if they are in a situation where they can get the tackle from Penn State, Fashanu, or the tackle from Notre Dame, Joe Alt. I think there's really only two building blocks right now on that offensive line, in Andrew Thomas and Schmitz. I like Evan Neal. To me, people have said, "Oh, why don't you move him inside the guard this year?" And I don't know if that's the right thing for the Giants to do in the middle of the season. I do know that the best year he had at Alabama came at left guard. And maybe I don't think you move him to guard and move him across the line now, but maybe you do that in the offseason. Maybe you do that when he's got an offseason and a preseason to readjust to the left-handed stance, move him inside, draft a right tackle or sign a right tackle in free agency, and try to build that way. See if that works. But I do think they have to figure out some way to play better along the offensive line. And if they can do that, I think this looks a lot better. Is it championship caliber? No, but I think it looks a lot better.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's funny, with all of the problems on the offensive line, that the quarterback situation has dominated the discussion so much, when there are two really top offensive tackles who are probably going to be there for the taking in somewhere in the top 10. Throw in, by the way, if you want to go yet another position of need, Marvin Harrison Jr. And let's just say that the Giants don't get one or two, that they get pick number 3 or 4 or 5 or something like that. Then between Marvin Harrison Jr. and the two tackles that you mentioned, the Giants could get themselves a potentially great player with that first round draft pick, and maybe try to pick up quarterback with their early second round pick, or package the early second round pick with the later second round pick that they got from Seattle to move back into the first round and get one of the other quarterbacks. And you might be able to hit two of those positions at once with possibly premier players. So they've got options to fix things. They just, I think those are the places they have to look, between tackle, wide receiver, and quarterback. That's what they've got to do early in the draft, I believe.
Absolutely, Tony. Absolutely. Well, I think that we have prattled on long enough for today. Giants fans, thank you as always for listening. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.